Good morning. That was awesome, Jamie and the band. Whew. What if you knew? I'd like to start my sermons with inviting you to set an intention for today. The music has been so powerful. I hope you enjoy the message. But I feel it's important to set an intention so that when you're done with this experience, you can walk away with a tool to remember who you are. What if you knew? So as we do this, it'll be about 20 seconds of closing our eyes. And also, I'd like us to take 3 deep breaths, go into silence, and find your intention of what you'd like to walk away with and carry with you for the rest of the week. So here we go. Let's inhale deeply together. Release. Breathe in. Release. Breathe in. And release. Thank you. So good morning, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today. I feel that Pablo Picasso said it well. He said that the meaning in life is to find your gift. The purpose in life is to give it away. And each and every one of us is in search for meaning and purpose. I feel that's part of our journey of our soul. And we come here on a beautiful Sunday when there's so many choices, not just to hear great music and a good message, but to remember who we are, to have that feeling of knowing, what if we knew who we really were? How would we face our fears? How would we face our challenges? That's what Ernest Holmes talked about, is change your thinking, change your mind. But it's much deeper than that, because truthfully, we have to pass a lot of intellectual garbage in our minds to get to our spiritual essence. It really interferes. And one of the things that I've realized listening to great people like Sadhguru, who talks about labels, who talks about when we identify with our small self, it's all about a label. And as my special ed adult students used to say, labels are for jars, not people. Okay. So we're here to rise above and transcend the judgments that our intellect has us in order to survive. Our brain needs to say, if it's not familiar and friendly, then it's out to attack my survival. We have a lot of trouble with this and also with our ego. And today, our topic is, like it has been all month and so eloquently talked by Grace and Reverend Elijah, speaking truth to circumstance. And let me tell you, it doesn't take very long to turn on the TV to find something that you can get outraged about and upset about. And this is an interesting thing. History is repeating itself again and again and again. Through our evolution as humans, we are going faster and faster towards growing. Our growing edge now with technology is at super speed, right? But I'd like to take us back 100 years ago, when my parents were born, when World War II was happening. Right now, there's a movie out called Oppenheimer. Thank you. I saw it yesterday on purpose because I had a calling to see it. Many of you know that back last year, I spoke about being in Oppenheimer's home and in his library back in Stinson Beach. And I'd like just to briefly go over that again, because it was such an impactful moment. I was doing a destination wedding for Josh and Laura Rankin, who come to church here. And I was in their library, in the library of the house they rented for this destination wedding. It was Oppenheimer's house. And in his library, it was a spiritual experience. It was like all done in the 1940s with leather chairs that had those buttons, you know, and the velvet couches with the prints and pictures of the San Francisco World's Fair. And I was just mesmerized by the books. I looked, and the third book I opened caught me. And so when I came home, I went on eBay, and I found it. It was written in 1941 by George Lemaitre. And he was talking about the conscious evolution of spirituality, art, poetry, and music at the turn of the century. And he also talked about Picasso and what a struggle he had, because it was so abstract and so different, nobody wanted to accept his art. You know, it was criticized. There was metaphysics coming on board. Then that's where our teacher came from, Ernest Holmes. There was Einstein, who created the quantum physics and thermodynamics physics. There was so much happening at the turn of the century for us to sit here today in and studying metaphysics. They were talking about spirituality. Oppenheimer was very interested in the Bhagavad Gita. That was his spiritual calling. He invited people into his home like Al Capone, John Steinbeck. And interestingly enough, as I was reading some biographies, 3 years before I was in that library, somebody was looking through those books and found a letter from John Steinbeck. That was very valuable. But it had the energy of something very special. You know, there was no TVs, there was chessboards and things. But this book that I brought today talked about the struggles that people were having during that time. Their media was the newspaper and word of mouth. But what was so impactful, I feel, is that they talked about the difference between perceptions and perspective. And this is the tool that I think is very important. Everyone has their own perception of the world, from their own personal experiences, what they've learned, what they've grown up in their cultures. But perceptions are illusions because they're only true for you. Perspective, on the other hand, is different. When you introspect, go within, that's part of any spiritual work. And that's why you, as spiritual warriors, I like to call you all, it is your responsibility, it is my responsibility to take care of our perspective and our perceptions. Because perceptions keep us in our tribes of what is true, what is not true, what is right, and what is wrong. And I'm not saying there isn't, but the truth that we call truth on facts, we know that facts change as we evolve. Am I right? So where is the truth? And I'd like to read out of Webster's dictionary the difference between truth and truth seen as the facts in the present moment and ultimate truth in the Webster's dictionary. I found that really cool. There is truth about the widely accepted facts. And then there's universal truth, which is trifold. Number one, everything is impermanent and changing. Number two, impermanence leads to suffering, making life imperfect. Number three, the true self is not personal and it is unchanging. With this perception and perspective, the perspective helps us understand situations from other positions, to consider other people's beliefs, and to experience different views as a pathway to empathy. That's really powerful. Really, really powerful. I brought my book here today, from the library of Oppenheimer. And because he was so curious, he said 2 quotes that, just kind of brought me to my knees. The first one, and I'm paraphrasing this, is that it is our responsibility to do our inner work. And it's just not, spirituality isn't a side dish to our lives. It's not. It's not. It's the main course. Because without that perspective, we perish. We suffer much, much more than we need to. And as in Jamie's song, we find power in our pain when we use spirituality as our first and foremost understanding of life. If we do not, our pain can destroy us. And when things that are poisonous come up into our environment, into our consciousness, into our society, it is our responsibility to lay the foundation to turn poison into good medicine. Yes. That is yours, that is mine. That's truly why you're here today, is to lay a foundation of a way, an awakening to humanity, and for the people who follow us, and for the children and the young adults who follow us, to say we have done our work. And the work starts first with introspection. Introspection. That means when we are confronted with anger, I had some last week, and I was cranky, and I was very aware, however. I wasn't doing it unconsciously, but darn, that work is not always fun. But when you get in it, and you start seeing what's in front of you instead of what's behind you, and realize that's where the good stuff is. That's where the joy lies. That's where the understanding lies. That's where the healing lies. But it comes from here. The quote out of the book, and they talked about everything. And I want to say something that was just so beautiful. As I was listening to the music, in the book they talked about fighting for poetry, art, and music. And they said, poetry, art, and music are not an expression of feelings, but they are a means of enlightenment of a higher essence. That's who we are. That's the soul of who we are. And during that time, Carl Jung came to the forefront, psychoanalysis, all kinds of things at the turn of the century. And Carl Jung talked about the fact that what Jamie and the band have that I don't have is that when somebody sings or you see a piece of art, it bypasses your conscious mind, which is where you get all the stop signs, and goes straight into your unconscious mind. And you hear it at that deep level without even having to judge it. And you remember who you are because it touches the soul. Speaking, on the other hand, you hope you can tell a good story that people can resonate and walk home with a tool in their pocket. And inspiration also gets to the place where it comes a feeling and not cerebral horseplay. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. Horseplay. Meaning that we can get so confused in our ideologies and so righteous. And we're told we're one. We're told we want to awaken our humanity so that they remember that we're not separate. But most of the time we're going around saying, what the heck is wrong with that other guy? I mean, come on. And what's wrong with the world? How do we heal? Perspective. And turning poison into medicine, this is one of the quotes from the book. They were lamenting about the way of the world at the turn of the century, with all the science challenging the universal truths that used to be. Quantum physics, wow. And here's what they said, the people who were aware of music, art, science, spirituality instead of religion. Emerson talking about nature and healing nature. Those are the topics, what? that we still are talking today. Here we go. One of the quotes. We have filled our material nature with numbing poisons. We must remove our shackles and liberate our mind to a visionary state. Spirit must be ripped from rational conceptions of the hypnotic world. That's pretty powerful, don't you think? Yep. How many think they've been hypnotized by the TV? Social media, yes. So what I am asking of you to introspect today is we are on the precipice of another big evolution. So we're having blowback. We're having extreme conflict. We're having extreme fear. If you're trying to figure out why we're in such conflict with one another, with our brothers and our sisters and our mothers and our fathers and our teens, because we're at the precipice of a big change, just like the turn of the century, an explosion, huge explosion. And one of them is artificial intelligence. And that's why looking to our past and realizing how important it is to hold on to the discoveries of our spiritual nature. And Oppenheimer in the movie was absolutely mind-blowing that many of the same things happening then are happening now. And the confusion and the inner struggle. And I say to you, when we turn poison into medicine, it is from within. It is not about the angry person out there, it's about the angry person in here. And perspective gives us empathy. We declare that we believe in oneness. We declare that change your thinking, you change your life. And the thinking is not just intellectual. It's actually to get the intellect out of the way, to go deeper. That's why we meditate. That's why we pray. And that's why we gather here. And one thing I know for sure is Ernest Holmes talked a lot about race consciousness. What is race consciousness? It's the human race. It's the consciousness of the planet. And either we are lulled to sleep by hypnotic poisons, or we dig deep to find the hidden treasures that every faith, every religion talks about it being hidden. Because it has to be found, it has to be processed through our own hearts, and definitely bypassing this with our perspective. The generations coming behind us depend on us. No matter what age you are, there'll be another generation behind you. How we're holding atomic energy, and by the way, atomic energy was done because somebody decided to think outside the box, because it was a paradox that actually found that they could split the atom, because it didn't make sense any other way but to get out of the box and look at it differently. We have to get out of our boxes. We have to get out of our boxes and think differently, so that when we introspect, we go to healing. And it's each and every one of our purpose is to do that for a better life within our hearts and minds, but also to be a part of the collective. It is a part of the collective. It's a part, we contribute to the collective unconscious. We contribute to the race consciousness. That doesn't mean you ignore anger or you don't stand up for social justice. I am not saying that. But how you turn poison into medicine does make a difference. You can't destroy poison. It will always exist. You have to be the alchemist and find a way to change that, to transform that, to transcend that. And I'm not standing here knowing I know it all. I'm just as blind as the next person. But I also know I'm also the person who is brilliant, like Jamie said in the song. the soul, the brilliance of our souls, the infinite intelligence, that connection to something greater than ourselves that we name. God, universal presence, spirit. So when Ernest Holmes said we have to mind our mind, he was right. But then Carl Jung says there's an unconscious that we also have to mind. And that can only be done with our inner work. Ernest Holmes said, it's not enough to say that we attract what we think. We become what we think. And what we become, we shall attract. When we walk through the difficult times in life and our anger, we must face it. And I said this last month, this quote I love, fear. Face everything and rise, not run. Rise. Because in the pain is the answer, is the power, is the healing. We're not going to crumble from our pain. That's when we're on our knees and we are willing to look within ourselves. Most of the time, if things are pretty good, we're not willing to do that. At least I'm not. I'm having a good time. Just keep on coming on, And then, boom, you walk into a wall. For me, last month was a really difficult one. It was self-care, and I was having a hard time with that. And when I walked out, I fell down and sprained my leg and my ankle, and then I was on a little walking cast for 4 weeks. And I realized I needed to have the opportunity to slow down and do some more introspection about how I care for myself. So I want you to take this and know that when Ernest Holmes talks about the revelation of mind, he's talking about doing the work so that you can get into a relationship with spirit. So I offer you that. Face everything and rise. Rise into knowing that you are the alchemist of the consciousness of not just you, but of everyone here on this planet and everything on the planet, like our statement. You come here to get a tool, and then you get to do the work. Darn. Wish I could just sprinkle it all around and say, now you're enlightened. But we have to discover that light within us first to become enlightened. So I offer you that today. Introspection, some hard work, and to look back at history, at all the pioneers that paved the way for us to be here today, to be able to be free to sit here and talk about metaphysics, which means, in Latin, beyond the physical, and how much we're attracted to that, and how you're committed by just giving up something else you could have done today to be here, to hear something that will inspire you, whether it's in that beautiful music or in the message or just someone that gives you a big hug, that we're here for healing. And you showed up, and I honor you for that. Thank you.